Hello, this is Sharon Sarago, and today we're going to continue our study of punctuation, and we'll study some apostrophes. We have three different uses that you have to know about apostrophes. The first is to indicate possession for nouns. The second is to indicate the omission of letters. And the third is to form the plurals of letters and numbers. We're going to start with the possessive form of nouns. When we show that a noun is possessive, we use an apostrophe. So here's the example. The girl's dress. Please notice that this word is girl. And in order to show possession, we just add the apostrophe and the S. The girl's dress. The child's boat. Notice that this is spelled C-H-I-L-D. It does not end in S, and therefore we add the apostrophe S. Here we have the three boys. That word actually ends in S. The three boys, that's how you spell it, B-O-Y-S. And because it already has an S, we don't need to put another one. We just put the apostrophe. Students often get confused about the use of the apostrophe when indicating possession. And the confusion centers around the issue of putting the apostrophe before the S or after the S. But it's a very simple matter. Just remember what I showed you. It's one simple little rule. If the word does not end in S, you add an apostrophe and an S. But if the word already has an S on the end of it, just add the apostrophe at the end of the word, of course. Just think of it this way. You do not need to have two S's sitting there. Here's another example. The hat of one girl's hat, because it was spelled G-I-R-L. It does not end in S, and therefore we have to add both the apostrophe and the S at the end of the word, just like this. If we had the hats of two girls, now this word is spelled G-I-R-L-S, and because it actually ends in S, we do not need to have another S on there. We just put the apostrophe. It's really that simple. Look at the rule again. If the word does not end in S, you add an S and an apostrophe. If the word already ends in S, just add the apostrophe at the end of the word. Don't worry about whether the word is singular or plural. Just look at the way it's spelled. If the original spelling of the word has no S at the end, you add apostrophe S. But if the word actually ends in S, you just add the apostrophe. Your only problem is that you have to make the determination on a test when the S is already sitting there. Does that word originally take an S, or does it originally not take the S? Now, we also have compound nouns. And when we do, the issue is a little bit confusing. So let's take a look at some examples. We've got Mary and Bob here. Let's say that Mary and Bob are married, and they both live in the same house. Well, then there's equal ownership. Therefore, we would say Mary and Bob's house, because Mary and Bob, now you can think of it as one legal entity. Mary and Bob, there comes the apostrophe, Mary and Bob's house. But if they're two individuals and they don't live in the same house, then you've got Mary's and Bob's houses. You see? So it makes a difference whether it's considered one unit or whether they're individual names. You will show joint possession by putting the apostrophe after the second name if it's one unit, Mary and Bob, together. And you will show individual ownership by making each noun possessive and adding an apostrophe to each name, like Mary's and Bob's houses. So we're going to practice now using apostrophes to show possession. I want you to actually rewrite these little phrases and place apostrophes where they're needed to show possession. Our example says, the coat of the girl, and we rewrite that to the girl's coat. Remember again, this word does not end in S, and therefore we have to add the apostrophe and the S. the dog of the two boys. Remember, this word actually ends in S, and therefore we just have the apostrophe. The house of the children. I don't care whether this is singular or plural or whatever. It does not end in S. And therefore, when you show possession, you have to add the apostrophe and the S. Do you understand why I'm telling you to not worry about whether it's singular or plural? And I know that teachers have been doing that for ages, but it's not necessary to teach it that way. It's very straightforward. If the original spelling of the word does not have an S on it, you have to put both the apostrophe and the S. But if the original spelling of the word actually does have an S, then you don't need an extra S, you just put the apostrophe. Here's your note. Either the noun ends in S or it doesn't. It's just that simple. If it doesn't end in S, you add the apostrophe and the S, and if it does, you add just the apostrophe. Here's your example. Your little test questions. This is not hard. You just look at this, and instead of saying the hat of the man, you're going to say the man's hat, of course, and you have to determine how to punctuate that with apostrophes. Then we're going to have some more practice adding apostrophes to possessive nouns, and again you're going to add the apostrophes to show possession. The difference between these two, of course, is that you've already got your sentence and your phrases, so you're not going to have to rewrite them. You just simply have to find out where you're going to put the apostrophe to show possession. So in this case, you would look at Martha and say, well, is her name really Martha or is her name Martha's? Well, her name is Martha. And so this S is part of your apostrophe S. When you look at this word, it says a day. Yes? Even though what's sitting in front of you has the S on front of it because it's a test question, a solid day's work, your task is to decide where you're going to put the apostrophe because the S is already there for you. But it's a day. That word does not end in S, so you know what to do with that. Then we show omissions in words and numerals with apostrophes. Here's your example. Can't, didn't, your, haven't. This one right here is the only one I can think of that doesn't follow the rule. This word actually stands for can not. And the apostrophe, by definition, shows where the omission of the letters occurs. Look at this one. Did not. The apostrophe shows where the O is missing. You are, your. The apostrophe shows where the A is missing. Have not. The apostrophe shows where the O is missing. It is. The apostrophe shows where the I is missing. But look here. Can not. So what's missing here is an N and an O. So it's to mark the omission of letters, whether it's just one letter here, O, or whether it's two letters, N-O, here. The apostrophe still shows omission of letters. And notice that the apostrophe goes exactly where the omission occurs. Apostrophes are also used to mark the omission of numbers. So instead of saying the class of 1967, we can actually write it the class of 67 and just leave off that 19. And in hopes that people will know that you're talking about 1967 rather than 1867. And nowadays we can say the class of 15. We're going to practice using apostrophes to show omissions here. Again, I have the words underlined for you where I want you to put your apostrophe, and you simply decide how that word originally is spelled and where the missing letter is. And wherever that missing letter is, that's where you're going to put the apostrophe. Some of you may never have known that it was actually to show omissions of letters, but that's what the apostrophe does there. And our last rule is to show plurals of letters, numbers, and words. We use an apostrophe and S to form the plurals of letters, numbers, signs, and words used as words. So here we've got V's, W's with the apostrophe S, T's, sixes, threes, pluses, minuses, and here are some words, ands, buts, so's. So I could have said, your essay has too many ands in it. Do you understand? Or when you speak, you say you have too many so's in your speech pattern. That pertains to me, I know. Using apostrophes to show plurals, we're going to rewrite the underlined words and place apostrophes where they're needed. Kids, just be very careful. This looks like us, doesn't it? But we're talking about an exercise to show where apostrophes are. So don't get carried away and say, oh, but Mrs. Arago, that word is US. That spells us. Then we've got our test-taking practice as normal. Just remember this is all about apostrophes, so you're not going to have to worry about anything else. Just get them correct. We have 2 pages of that. And then we have our passage-based testing. And again, this is what you're going to see in November. Be sure that you understand that the S is already added in these things. And so you have to decide, was this the correct way to say it? Is it 6 years or is it 1 year? You see? Think about it. Think, think, think. And then we have our answers. Check your answers. And anything that gave you trouble, then you want to mark it so that when we get on our webinar together, then you can ask me about it. Because I'm going to say, what questions do you have? And I will do a little bit of review, but basically the whole thing is for you to get some clarification over things that you didn't quite understand. So go back and review all these rules, do your work, and I will see you in a day or two.